So today we'll be talking about the 2023 RIBA China Landmark 100 Urban Complex Roundtable Conference. Uh, so we'll be talking about the diversity of the urban landmark and system, and diversity of the function, and diversification of the spatial experience within the making urban China landmark urban complex. So we'll be doing the asking a lot of few questions about this. So let me just brief you on the just to brief you on the RIBA perspective on the diversification of the urban landmark. So China has diversification is the heart of the China's architectural design practice, and in 9.6 million square kilometer land, 691 different cities, and characteristics of the development of the city. Uh, Diversification of the function of the city is the some cities, some of the landmark become the some become the three-dimensional part of the life of the people's life, and also spatial experience. Some of the uh, spaces has become people's life and open in their daily lifestyle, and also the spatial experience of the diversification of the urban landscape. Uh, some of the buildings have its own quality. It's become known for its own color and iconic visual experience and scenes for the visitors and deep personal memory, and also become the fuller experience of the city. So let me just ask you a big question in the context of diversity. Uh, there's a one saying, the contemporary cities are more or less the same. How do you perceive diversity as an architect? Is there anyone like to answer this?
I don't mind starting. I mean, it does sound like a statement that's stated by a real estate agent rather than as a designer.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure real estate agents would prefer that most of the cities look the same. It's very easy for them to sell space. But the reality is that all cities are, of course, they're terribly different. If you look at Orchard Road in Singapore or the CBD area, yes, it's relatively the same. Retail developments, big shopping centres and commercial office buildings. But if you move out of the city centre where real life happens in places like Singapore, it's terribly difficult. That's where you find the real diversity. In areas like Seligi, it's interesting. In areas like Beauty World, it's very interesting. In Juchit in Singapore, that's where you really start to see the diversity and culture of the city coming together. So it's just about familiarizing yourself. As a foreign architect, when I worked in China 20 years, when I first started working there, it was like, I'm going to behave the same way that I behaved on projects in Europe. Of course, that shouldn't happen, but it takes a long time before you understand the cultural environment of the city. And places like China are incredibly complex culturally and historically. And you can't expect to understand that as you dive in and dive out of these places. So it takes a long time before you understand really the minutiae and special aspects of a city. So it's about spending time there and understanding them a little bit before you can really translate that into a project.
Yeah, okay, good. You can hear me. I'll turn that on. No, Stephen makes some very good points. I just talk from personal experience when we are kind of commissioned or we win a competition in China. yeah, absolutely. Spaces are used kind of different culturally, and though there's a common theme globally, placemaking, that's intrinsic to society. I feel like with some of the recent projects we've done in Hangzhou, which was a car park, which in principle sounds a particularly dull project. This is where I think you can come into your own as an architect. We kind of employed public spaces within the car park, both on the roof areas, and created public space below. And, when I talk about the cultural aspect DNA of China, how elder people use public space at certain times of the evening with the dancing. This is a great way for them to get out of the high rises, come together. They digest their food. It's healthy. It's social. It's exercise. The younger generation, which some can't afford their own properties, so it's a good time for them to go out to spaces, meet friends, hang out together, and we try to kind of coerce the client in some respects to give a little bit back to kind of encourage and be kind of more responsive to that social dynamic that China has, that Chinese culture has, that is different to, say, Europe. And the way Peter Cook earlier in a great talk highlighted how the urban fabric or spaces of Europe, how we use space. So yeah, I do think more projects that could embrace that theme in the way more ancient style of architecture was used is a very positive thing going forward for China.
Okay. Anybody like to comment on it?
Well, I try to add on to yours. I was grew up here, China. China, you see the contemporary diversity. It's very difficult to in a couple words. But I would try to say China. All the cities are very, very old. In America, about 300 years old is very old. But here, sitting right here, if you go to Shanghai, it's a new city, but still a couple hundred years old.
Yeah.
So when we talk about diversity, already very diverse because the history of China itself, it's southern China, North, Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Shanghai, Beijing, all very different because just, 3,000 years of history. Mm-hmm. So right now, the Chinese government, we do a lot of urban planning. I just talked to other colleagues here. We do a lot of urban renewal, which never happened before. I think the government are more interested into looking to diversify, how to diversify, make they say the landmark, right?
Yes.
Landmark for a city, which you already have because it has, thousands of years history. So, 10 years ago, we all want to make a modern cities. Nobody cares about history, but I hope as an architect planner, I think in the next generation, the architect should really focus. Also, the government here, China, should focus on the history of the city, where if it belongs to. It already makes the difference to the other cities.
Yeah.
That's my point of view.
That's good. Anybody like to comment on that? Okay.
I think you mentioned a very good point. The role of urban authorities in ensuring that diversity is really amplified and celebrated is so important. Every city has its context, its climate, its history, its culture. I think it's really an amalgamation of bringing that together to create a language which will make that city stand apart. And I think city authority has a big role to play in it. But as architects, we have a very important role to play as well. So I think it's about amalgamating these factors and not just, transporting or transposing an architectural theme or a language from one to another. Yeah, I think that would probably be the way to look at diversity here.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, let me move on to the next question. In your opinion, how can an urban landmark embrace diversity when the lifestyle of other cities does not have huge difference? how do you embrace diversity when the lifestyle of the people in the city is not doesn't have a huge difference? Anybody like to comment on that?
Well, it's a false statement, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Because cities are very diverse. I think we've all said that. Let me just give you two examples. I lived in Beijing for nearly 3 years and lived at Janwai Soho, which of course is built by the Soho Development Corporation. So it's a single owner. But the quality of spaces there and typologies of different units makes it very interesting and quite diverse. Diverse commercially and diverse culturally. And I think that's a great example about fantastic contribution to a city. In fact, when I lived there, I hardly ever left because I could do everything there. I get my hair cut, get my toes manicured. I had my office there and I lived there, so I hardly ever ventured anywhere else. And there's a wonderful project in Singapore that's called Kampong Admiralty by Woha that some of the young guys in Singapore were talking about a little bit earlier on. It's a very different project to Janwai Soho in that it's not a single developer. It's developed by a number of different Singaporean agencies. And so the mixture of components is quite different. It has housing, has education, has healthcare, has shopping and retail. So you've got these different agencies all working together in this sort of strange layer cake of a building. I mean, it's not the most beautiful building, but I wouldn't say it's ugly, but I think it's fantastic in the way it's put together and the way these diverse cultures interact with one another. It's very vibrant and it's very green as well. So I think there is a great aspect of diversity and variation in a city come together in a very positive way.
Well,
anybody else like to comment on that?
I think one way of embracing diversity is, sort of looking at the creators of the language, right? The architects, the designers, right? I mean, buildings are essentially, a creator's sort of manifestation, a designer's manifestation. So who are these designers? Is there diversity within that team which is producing these designs, So I think in order to create a language which is diverse enough, in order to embrace that diversity in the architecture, we need to have a diverse set of individuals with a diverse set of experiences, which can bring about innovation in design, which can bring about a dialogue and create something special. So, embracing diversity can be done on various levels. As Stephen pointed out, it could be done programmatically. I think it could be done with help of putting together a team of diverse designers and, thought-provoking conversations which come from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent.
It's interesting, I think, because with any project, whether it's large or small, in the city or it could be in a more rural context, actually the collaboration with government as a dialogue is important, right? They can, I suppose through strategic briefing, to understand maybe the needs more, and as this rolls out through the development of a project, I think the codes in China, I was discussing with a colleague earlier, in some situations they're extremely restrictive. So in that sense, where Simon gave a very interesting talk pre this debate, where in the UK now, where we're rethinking the future life of a building, how it can be multi-use in the future, and it starts to kind of move along a little bit more to, carbon footprints, being more sustainable, these kind of elements. I think diversity in that sense, that's a very important point. It's a very common theme, a bit of a mantra here at WAF this week, a very much a global debate, how we can make our environments healthier, more enjoyable. And, of course, buildings are a big part of that. I mean, it's been highlighted many times this week. So this is an interesting way. I think working together with government, planners, architects, therefore you're going to get more diversity, you're going to get more creativity, and it's going to give a lot more longevity to spaces and buildings, which is a very positive thing. for China in the 21st century.
I totally
Yeah.
agree with
Yeah, please briefly comment.
What make building longer, lifetime. But to me, I make really sure that
Maybe
I
you
would,
can turn on your mic because, yeah.
how is it?
Yeah,
I'm
good.
sorry.
Okay.
I think past 20 years practice in China, the first 10 years I was working in Chengdu, Shanghai, the city are very diversified, because the clients are local developers. That's why, talking about in Beijing, that, those big projects now last 10 years, because it was all done by, the huge developers, international or local Chinese developers. They are big, and they try to produce this, making the building as a product. I do in the building same as Guangzhou and Shanghai and Beijing. So, I won't say that's international, right? That's just want to make a product easier to sell, and that's very commercialized development. So, it's not by architect. I was forced. I tried to do something different, but normally 99% was forced by my client. Of course, somebody might say here, I don't want to say that. But in the true world, yes, basically architects and designers were forced to do the very international contemporary products as a building everywhere in China, so make less diversified, which is not healthy, right? According to you.
Absolutely,
Agree,
you're kind of future-proofing more, right? It's kind of not an
So-
instant.
One thing nice I see last 2 years, 3 years, because of the pandemic, all the big developers are slowed down. The big Evergreen was bankrupt in China.
Yes.
Might be a good thing, although he can't collect the money. But thank God. But maybe we back to the 20 years ago. We do local products, very diversified with the local people. Who use it, so it makes everything correct.
True.
Or I won't say vernacular, but very diversified itself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Let's move on to next question. Do you have any experience related to diversity when designing the nominated urban landmarks? Any experience related to diversity?
I suppose I'll pitch in at this point. We were asked to kind of do a competition that we won in just south of Shanghai in Fengxian, and it was kind of trying to fuse 4 plots of land to kind of create a kind of hub in this new district of the city, and obviously to connect over waterway you need a bridge. So we connected all 4 plots and made it one bridge. And it's always kind of, through history, say Florence, for example, the habitable bridge has always been kind of a fascination with our industry. So, this is where we kind of diversified the brief and, made it a kind of habitable bridge, like a marketplace, a public square. If anything, we touched on, ancient China. I mean, you're the founders of the habitable bridge. I mean, it was Marco Polo that stole it and brought it our way. So, I feel a bit of a thief bringing it back. But that was a case where we diversified with the brief for the goodness of the public and creating something that had a sustainability about it.
Yeah. Let's be brief about it because we are limited on the time. So if anybody likes to comment very briefly.
I've got one example, but it's a strange way to answer the question because about 15 years ago I designed a project in Beijing called Raffle City Beijing on Dongjiamin.
Yes.
And it's a sort of ubiquitous product of CapitaLand, great Singaporean developer. It's not unremarkable building. It's got some very nice aspects to it, but how I'd like to answer the question is the way that the people of Beijing use this building at nighttime. And it goes back to what this guy was saying. Here at nighttime, we had this public plaza in front of the building, main entrance, thoroughfare. But at nighttime, the locals would come out in their 50, 100 people at nighttime with their boom boxes and start dancing in front of the building, sort of playing music. I thought this was the most wonderful invention. And it's a good lesson to architects. You know, you can program a building, you can understand how the typologies work, but the unpredictable nature about how people use your building is what really rocks, I think. That's the great cultural idea and integrity that perhaps we can contribute to.
Okay, thank you. So we are limited on the time, so let's move on to next question. So what would be the future possibilities of the urban landmark in your opinion? Just closing remarks.
I think future possibilities is a broad term, of course. I think, as Simon was mentioning moments back, we are on this race of sustainability, of low carbon. I think that's definitely going to be, I mean, it's a no-brainer, really.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to drive a lot of this conversation. But to bring in the whole idea of diversity into the mix, of course, adds a certain, nuance to it. And I think that will make a very important point in this conversation, yeah?
Yes.
So low carbon sustainability, of course, would play a huge role in how we create these landmarks or these future projects, yeah?
Okay, thank you. Anybody like to comment briefly?
Just very short. I
very
think,
short,
to
yeah.
my point of view, future in China, it will not be the big and tall anymore. So we have to look something into different, maybe historical, regeneration, green buildings and public spaces instead of big and tall, mega buildings. I don't think we'll see that, too much in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Daniel?
and just briefly,
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
it doesn't have to be a landmark. You don't have to always scream and shout, that this building is
Yes.
this. I think architects, planners, government, we can all make spaces diversify, and make them very enjoyable, sustainable places
Okay.
to be. Yeah.
Okay.
I think one of the examples that was shown 30 minutes ago, the steelworks in Beijing, that's a landmark. That's great use of an existing building and typology into something that's completely different. New life for old buildings. Stop building shitty, huge towers that serve no purpose anymore. The world is not expanding, less people. Don't knock them down, reuse them. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for the.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.